and the meeting is now being recorded and live streamed. So I'll take this adherent for this meeting of the Executive Committee held on the 1st of February 2023. I see that we have present Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown and Carmichael. Also Councillors Chalmers, Clark, Convery, Councillor Cooper, I see that she's present remotely. Councillor Cowan is also present, as are Councillors Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson, Miller and Horsham. I have apologies from Councillor Keat, and Councillor Cowie is here substituting for him, and I see that she's here. Councillor Logan is here, as is Councillor Loudon participating remotely. Councillor Hugh MacDonald I have present. Councillor McCallan I have present. Councillor Catherine McClymont has intimated her apologies, and I see that Councillor Susan Kerr is here substituting for Councillor McClymont. I see that we have present Councillors McCreary, Leslie MacDonald, McGeever, McLachlan and Nelson. Also Councillors Razak and Robb. I have apologies from Councillor Ross, and Councillor Salamati is substituting for Councillor Ross, and I see that he's participating remotely. Councillor Shearer is also participating, as is Councillor Margaret Walker. So there are a number of officers also present at the meeting, and with that, Chair, I'll hand you back to I'll hand you back for the business.
Thank you very much. Can we come now to item 1, which is declarations of interest, and can I invite any declarations of interest just now? I'm not seeing any declarations of interest, so can we come to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. They're on pages 5 to 14 of your papers. Are there any questions arising from the minutes? I don't see any questions. Can I ask that we agree the minutes? Okay, they're approved as a correct record. Can I come to item 3, which is a revenue budget monitoring for period 10, and can I invite Paul Manning to speak to the report?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is the revenue budget monitoring that takes us up to the end of the last calendar year. This report is a bit different from the other ones that you'll get during the year, because it reports on what we call our probable outturn position, and that's an exercise that the officers undertake between November and January each year to try and get an assessment of the year-end position. So this isn't the year-end, but it's where we think we're going to be when we get to the end of the year. Another part of this paper is, based on that probable outturn, there are some contributions to reserves that I would look to get the committee to approve. So it's lengthy and it's a bit different from the way this normally looks. Under background, and this is at the top of the second page, at 3.2, it covers the appendices to the paper. Now, there are 6 of these, and it goes through various iterations of the budget. The first appendix that's in there gives an account of some of the items in here in more detail. This is just to save the covering report becoming too burdensome. The second appendix shows the financial position before we make contributions to reserves. We've then got 2 appendices that go through the contributions to reserves. Then we show what the position would be after we've made those. At the end of this, we've got appendices which cover off the housing revenue account as well. So the main points from this: after the various contributions to reserves, there's an underspend of £4.696 million. Now, I'm reading here from 4.2 in the paper. And at 4.2, you can also see Table 1, which summarises where this comes from. So you see that the figure in bold at the bottom right-hand corner, 4.696, and there are 4 categories that are making this up. And I'll just quickly talk you through the main issues in each of those categories. The first one says resource position. And there are 2 main things to flag within this. The first of them, this is covered in 4.4 and 4.5, mentions an overspend against housing and technical resources, which relates to a provision in respect of the management of the estates function. So that accounts for the fact that that resource position is going to be overspent. Also within that resource position, the other big issue that's in there is covered at 4.7. And this is something that was done in last year's probable outturn and last year's accounts, and we're looking to do it again this year. And it relates to the IJB. And what it says in here is that the IJB financial regulations allow for unplanned underspends to be retained by the council, and therefore our contribution to the IJB can be adjusted by that amount. And there is this underspend of £5.635 million. Now, what it's proposed, and this is the same thing that was done last year, is that that's retained by the council to help cover the children and families' budget pressures. So again, throughout the year, we've been reporting the fact that there is a significant overspend within children and family services. This could be retained by the council and used to help that position in 2023-24. So, as I've said already, that replicates what we did last year, and that money would be put into reserves. Now, that's the position in 2022-23. It's not a permanent situation with the IJB. So those are the two things within that resource position line. The other lines that are in that table, we've got loan charges, and what you can see is that there's an underspend there of £1.18 million. That relates to the fact that we've borrowed less across the year than we thought we would, and we've saved money on interest. Corporate items shows an underspend of £2.347 million. What's in there is an underspend on the budget for fuel, an underspend on our national insurance budget, and we've also got elements of admin grant that the council received for cost of living payments that contribute to that underspend. There's also an item covered at 4.10, which relates to the council meeting that we had a fortnight ago today, and the change that the council agreed at that point on service concessions. And what's been suggested here, and this is carried forward into the recommendations, is something that was covered in that paper on the 18th of January. It was about using £5.7 million of that service concession money to fund the pay award in year 2022-23. So again, I'll come back to that under recommendations. The other element that we've got in here, which is the final line in the table, relates to council tax. So the council tax position is £1.504 million better than we thought it was going to be. A big part of that is down to additional properties and collecting more in arrears than we expected the last time that we went through this in detail. So between these things, this makes up this probable outturn position, which is an underspend of £4.696 million. Table 2 goes through the position in overall terms, and it also refers to the two appendices I mentioned at the start of my presentation about transfers to reserves. So you can see these in Appendix 3 and Appendix 4. So Appendix 3, which you can see on page 25 of your papers, goes through the new contributions to reserves which are proposed as part of this paper. These probably split into two camps. One set relates to things that are done every year. So, for example, about a third of the way down the page, you can see Pupil Equity Fund. Now, this is to do with the fact that the financial year and the academic year don't match. So there's money that we need to carry forward in our balance sheet for the months from April through to June in order to fund the pupil equity funding for schools. You can see £1.5 million there. You can also see midway, just underneath that, the children and families money that I referred to a second ago. This is this interchange with the IJB. And the rest of the significant items on that page, what you will see are wording in capital and in bold that says these are already proposed as part of the budget strategy. So these are things that we've brought to you across the course of this year where I've said, look, there's a position in the current year that's to our advantage. We can take the money forward to 2023-24 and use it to reduce the budget gap. So these are things that have already been discussed, and what we're doing here is making the contribution into reserves at the end of the current financial year in order that we've got that benefit next year. If I can go back to the recommendations at the beginning of the paper, and these, like the rest of the paper, are lengthy, it's asking for noting of that £4.7 million underspend at the start. It's asking for approval of those transfers to reserves. Between recommendations 3 and 4, it's referring to this unplanned underspend within the IGB and that being retained by the council and looking to get the approval for that. It references at section 5 the service concession monies and the use of those to pay for the pay award in 2022-23. At recommendation 6, it talks about what happens with that £4.696 million. Well, it will be transferred to reserves to assist with the 2023-24 budget strategy. And then recommendation 7 just notes the position as it stood at the end of December, and recommendation 8 notes the break-even position on the housing revenue account. So having gone through those, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on them. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. Can I ask if there are any questions at this point for Paul? And I'm not seeing any, but I'm just going to give it a wee moment in case they appear on this. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in that item. So if that's the case, given there are some recommendations in there, can I move the report?
I'll second it.
Are we agreed? Agreed. We can agree the report. Thanks very much. Can I come now to item 4, which is the capital programme update and also monitoring for period 10, and can I return to Paul Manning? Paul.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this is the capital budget, and this does a similar thing, and it tries to get an assessment of where we think our capital spend is likely to be at the end of the year. Now, there are some adjustments to the capital programme that we've got in the appendix, and you can see them at Appendix 1. That's on page 33 of your papers, and there's an explanation given in paragraph 4.2 on these. What we're doing is including additional funding for new projects. So we're bringing these in to recognise them in the capital programme, but this funding isn't going to spend in year 2022-23. It's going to be carried into year 2023-24, and that's what's happening here. So the additional funding is coming from 3 places. And you can see that in the paper. It's coming from the Renewable Energy Fund, it's coming from Clyde Wind Farm, the fund that relates to that, and it's also coming from developer contributions. So you can see a number of projects there. The money's coming in, it's being recognised. That lets officers start work on preparation for those, but we're recognising that the money isn't going to be spent until the new financial year. On the second page of the paper, there's a couple of standout things just to draw your attention to. General capital grant, we do have a revision to our capital grant for 22-23 that was notified to us when we got the settlement letter at the end of December, and that represents an increase of £202,000 to our capital grant. And there's an explanation there. Given the late notification of this, any new projects are unlikely to be designed and completed prior to the end of this financial year. So what we're going to do with that is use it to fund the existing programme, and we would reduce borrowing related to the capital programme. Then there's a reference, in the same way as we had with the revenue paper, to what we think we're going to spend in the 2022-23 programme. So there's a projection given there at section 4.7. We believe we're going to underspend by around £5.3 million on the General Fund programme. And there's a bit of background given to that. Now, this is symptomatic of where we are at present and where we're likely to be for a period of time. Progression on a number of projects has been impacted upon by current market conditions. That means materials are harder to get, and we end up with longer lead-in times for projects. So that's part of the explanation as to why this is happening. And we did see an element of this during the last financial year as well. At the end of the paper, and this is on page 31, we cover the outturn exercise for the housing capital programme as well. And again, you know, we give an estimated outturn there of £66.361 million. There is a cautionary note against that. The recent extreme weather experienced caused flooding damage to a whole number of properties, and as a result, people had to be diverted to deal with that work rather than picking up capital expenditure. So there is a risk to that we just need to be wary of. So in terms of the recommendations in this paper, looking for noting of that position at period 10, and that the adjustments that are in the paper at Appendix 1, that those be approved, Chair. Thanks, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Paul. Again, can I ask the committee if there are any questions for Paul on that item? And can I come to Councillor Robb?
Thank you. Thanks for the paper, Paul. This is just a small wee question. What is the Community Facilities Fund? It's page 38, and it's under Housing and Technical. Just to ask for a bit more information, not necessarily now, just to, by email would be fine.
Chair, I'm happy to come back to Councillor Robb with that. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'm not seeing any other questions, so can I move the recommendations in that report, and can I ask that we agree the report? Agreed. Can I come now to item 5, which is additional funding from government and other external sources, and can I return to Paul to speak to that item?
Thanks, Chair. So what we have, and this is summarised in the appendix, in pages 43 and 44 of the papers, you can see revenue funding coming in. This totals £3.855 million, 1.875 for Teachers Induction Scheme, that's for year 2022-23, £1.98 million for child bridging payments. So these will be made by councils this year. That comes to £1.98 million, which takes us to that total of 3.8. And as I referred to, this is on page 44 a second ago, in terms of the general capital grant, we did get an extra £202,000. So that's what you can see on page 44. So again, happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Are there any questions on that item? Can I come to Robert Brown?
It's not so much a question, Chair, as a comment about the lack of one item, which is the Levelling Up Fund, which I'd like to raise under this heading, if that's appropriate. The UK Government's Levelling Up Fund, as you know, was the subject of a number of bids from different councils, including 3 from South Lanarkshire. And the 3 from South Lanarkshire were Clydesdale Way, the EV charge points project, and probably most importantly of all, the £17 million bid for decontamination work at Shawfield. Now, none of these bids were accepted by the UK Government. Indeed, neither did we get any bids accepted in round 1 of the project either. I know there's been a lot of publicity from Glasgow about the fact that they didn't get anything accepted this time either, although they did have something in phase 1. And I think there's a number of issues that arise out of all of this. The main one, of course, is that it produces a bit of a gap going forward in terms of the things we'd be able to do with the very welcome money in that regard. Levelling Up Fund is obviously a very major, potentially significant contribution to what we can do in South Lanarkshire, and the fact we've been knocked back on these things, I think, is a bit of a worry. Now, South Lanarkshire was prioritised as level 1, which is the top priority, if you like, one of the councils under that particular heading. And therefore, what I'd really like to suggest is we have a paper that comes to a suitable meeting, possibly Communities Enterprise very shortly, that goes through the background to this, any information we can get about the reasons for rejection. I don't think these were technical. I don't think there was anything that was knocked back in terms of the actual background or the format of the reports or anything of that sort. The decontamination issue in particular seemed to be right spot on what you'd expect a Levelling Up Fund to do. And to be quite honest, I struggle to find out or to understand why, amongst all the other things that have gone forward here, this one in particular was rejected with all the potential there would be for the post-industrial decontamination that goes with that. So the points I'd like to actually have dealt with are, were they technically in order, which I think they were, but met the necessary criteria? Has there been any feedback from the government as to why South Lanarkshire didn't succeed in either of the 2 rounds? What were the preparation costs? Can you give any indication of that? Glasgow talked about £500,000, quite an extensive costs in their instance, apparently. What other options are there for dealing with the hole in the budget that comes from the regeneration fund in particular? There is to be a phase 3 as we understand it. Have we any information about the date or the potential for that or greater success in that particular regard? And broadly speaking, can we have a report on the background to all of this and the implications of it for the next meeting? I just wanted to say in finality, if I might, that, as I say, we are dependent on funding coming in from outside sources in a number of respects, on this one in particular. And given the objectives of this particular fund, I find it actually quite incomprehensible that the UK government decision-making process hasn't ended up with an award of some sort to South Lanarkshire on this particular matter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Robert. And I think, from my point of view, I think it's important that we have a paper that assesses the outcome of the Levelling Up Fund process and the implications for South Lanarkshire. And I'm sure across the Council we would all share the sentiments that you've expressed. I'm going to come to our officials maybe to pick up on the actual questions that were put there. So can I maybe come to David Booth to respond to that?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And I've tried to jot down those particular questions, so if I get them out of order, you can keep me right. So the first question you asked was, were our bids technically in order? Yes, as far as we're aware, they were technically in order, and we thought they were robust bids. Secondly, you asked what feedback have we had from the UK Government in terms of the rejection. We haven't had any feedback yet other than letters against each individual bid to say they were unsuccessful. However, we have asked for feedback on that. We haven't received that yet. In terms of the preparation costs for our bids, the majority of which would be officer time, which we can try to estimate, but it would, however, be an estimate in terms of that amount of time and resource that was put into the bids. You asked about the options for the regeneration fund, and I'm taking it from that you mean the decontamination of Shawfield. Obviously, we'd hoped to get the £17 million through the Levelling Up Fund. That was, as you know, unsuccessful. We're in discussions at the moment, along with Glasgow City Council and Clyde Gateway and our city region partners, to look at how we would continue to try to take that forward, that decontamination work. And I know that Clyde Gateway are also in discussions with the Scottish Government in the same respect. But again, we're looking at that, but we don't have any money at hand at the moment to take that forward. You asked about the phase 3, and when that might happen. We understand that, that further news will come on phase 3 in the spring. And if it's based on the previous 2 phases that have come in, there's usually quite a quick turnaround for that. So we don't know the criteria as yet for phase 3, but we're expecting to find some information on that. And then I suppose your last point about a report coming back potentially to Community and Enterprise Committee, and I'm happy to do that. The timing of that would be dependent on when we receive the feedback from the UK Government. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the Chief Executive just to supplement that response from David, if that's all right.
Thanks, Chair. And all that David has shared underpins our sense of being aggrieved that what we thought were 3 substantial bids that would contribute significantly to levelling up South Lanarkshire have not been successful. We did, however, get feedback on the round 1 bid, which was the EV submission. And at the time, the UK Government fed back to us that it had been unsuccessful because it hadn't demonstrated expenditure within that financial year. We resubmitted highlighting the 8 places within that bid where expenditure within the financial year had been outlined. And we had an acknowledgement that that had been missed when they had appraised the first bid. We thought that, therefore, would have stood us in good stead for the reconsideration of the second bid. I've also had the opportunity to meet with, at ministerial level, with colleagues in the UK Government ministers. And we've made the point that I think Scottish local government across all councils have been making for the last couple of years, which is, as described in the media, the bid and begging bowl approach to competitive bidding is not a good approach, doesn't make good use of resources that are very scarce just now, and an awful lot of excellent work across all 32 authorities effectively ends up on the cutting room floor because of the competitive nature of this. We have strongly advocated and again made the point that if this is about levelling up, we need to find the right measures to identify the areas in greatest need across the UK and target the funding accordingly and give local systems, the way that the Shared Prosperity Fund has been approached, give local systems the opportunity to identify what they feel would be most effective to level up. And you would go forward with long-term certainty that the funding's in place. You simply need to find the projects that will actually advantage our area. And with David's good grace, just to make a point around the Shawfield area and the hexavalent chromium contaminant that has blighted that wider area for decades. And we have spent, as a public sector, tens of millions to date in doing the excellent work, but we need to go and finish this work so that we can unlock a huge parcel of potential land for economic development in South Lanarkshire and once and for all deal with the contaminant that's in the ground. Thanks, Chair.
Could I come back briefly on that, if I may, Chair, just to say that I very much echo, I think, what the Chief Executive has said, particularly about the localisation of the mechanisms of going forward here. We have got in this area quite substantial, successful mechanisms, proven mechanisms for dealing with these things. Clyde Gateway, the city deal arrangements and the council's own arrangements on top of that. And I think it's fair to comment as well, there's been some wider criticism of the Levelling Up Fund. I mean, the funds obviously in general terms are welcome. The general direction of travel is welcome. But having said that, the fund is too small. Too much of it seems to go to the southeast. There's this local decision issue thing as well. And there is, frankly, an issue of whether the actual decisions match the criteria set by the government in the first place in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So I very much echo the Chief Executive's point on that one, but this localism point is really pretty important going forward, I think.
Okay. I now have two other questions which I'll come to. So can I come to Alec Allison?
Wasn't so much a question. Just agree with Councillor Brown in a disappointment in not being successful. There was a great many schemes, both accepted and not. Unfortunately, we've been on the wrong side of that. The point I was wanting to make was the one that then Cleland actually came out and made himself. I think there needs to be an agreement as to how that scheme is taken forward, because a lot of investment is made and then not able to be realised through lack of success. And being able to target better, I think, and giving us more authority locally would be welcomed. And I'm pleased that the Council has already raised that issue.
Thanks for that, Alec. Could I come now to John Anderson?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering whether it's worthwhile putting in a third bid if they're going to change the rules like they did after the second bid, where they said if you'd got money successful in the first round, you weren't getting it in the second round. Do we know, is that going to apply with the third round? For those councils that have money on the first round or the second round, won't be getting it in the third round? Thanks.
I think the position right now is we don't know anything about the criteria going into the third round, and unless somebody wants to correct me, no, that is the case. But I do think it's worthwhile us putting in our submissions, because the reality is that the level of funding that we're able to access through a successful bid is far in excess of the level of funding we're able to access through any of the similar pots of money that are out there. And I wouldn't want to think we're missing out because we've been put off bluntly by an impenetrable kind of process around decision making. I think we've got to do our best to get as much money as we can into the area. And there is, already discussions, as you'll know from the area committee yesterday, we're already talking about potential bids for Levelling Up Fund Round 3, but members of Parliament can support bids in their constituencies. And we're already looking at other funding sources, whether it's the city deal, as Councillor Brown alluded to, other potential funding sources, I should say, around how we make sure that particularly that issue of the decontamination of Shawfield is taken forward, because as the Chief Executive says, there is a risk to basically undoing a lot of the good work that's been done around remediation if we can't successfully complete the project. Okay. Are there any other questions on that? I'm not seeing any other questions, and we will bring forward a paper either to the Executive Committee or to Community and Enterprise, just picking up the outcome of the Levelling Up Fund process. Okay. Can I come now to... Well, can I ask that we agree the report? Sorry, can we agree the report? Thank you. Right. Can I come now to item 6? This is on developing an age-friendly South Lanarkshire, and can I invite Kay McVeigh to speak to that item?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sure members will agree it's a report that's important to us all as we're all participating in the ageing process. So this report gives us a summary on developing an age-friendly community, advises on the role that the Council have in supporting that development, gives a little update on the work currently undertaken by Seniors Together, and then just outlines actions required by the Council to assist the process in moving forward. So an age-friendly community is one where we can all participate in activities regardless of what age and stage we are at, where people are treated with respect. It's easy for older people to stay connected and to stay healthy and active in their later years, but also provides appropriate support to those who can no longer look after themselves in quite the same way. In terms of ageism, it is a significant form of discrimination here in the UK, something absolutely that as a council in our qualities work, we would do some work round about. In terms of the background for the age-friendly community, the World Health Organisation, they have a framework, age-friendly communities, and that acts as a guide for communities in taking this forward. At 3.2, you can see the subject areas covered within that, and obviously you can see they are very relevant to the Council. In terms of our current position, during lockdown we felt some of the restrictions that individuals can have in our communities, where you've not got the capacity to go out and about, and you then have to think about what's within your local area or your livable neighbourhood. So can you access your daily needs within a safe short walk? Are the services there age friendly? And Seniors Together are currently liaising with the Centre for Ageing Better and the Scottish Older Persons Assembly, SOPA. And they've been providing support to us in developing our knowledge and understanding of how to take this process forward for South Lanarkshire. SOPA in particular have had funding for a year for a project worker to come and help us in that, and they are currently working with Seniors Together. In terms of age-friendly communities, it's very much about the communities aspect of that, and that part that partners can play in that process, and that's really why in our proposals we are suggesting that we provide a place for representatives from Seniors Together to participate in the Community Planning Partnership Board as a voice for older people, and that would really assist us in taking this work forward with our partners. We're actually in quite a good place here in South Lanarkshire, so we have case studies that have been developed by Seniors Together, just illustrating some of the work that we've done. Members will probably be most familiar with things like our Men's Shed project, which certainly gets a lot of activity in my own area. So we're quite a way along the journey in terms of developing that age-friendly community approach, but we do need to do an audit of what's there in the current stages, and also then that will help us with an action plan. So in terms of a strategic plan, in order to have a shared vision, really the Community Planning Partnership is the best place to drive forward that across the partners, and the audit would certainly assist in the development of that. So that plan will be at the heart of developing the age-friendly community and our next steps. So our next steps are identified at 5.5, and that's really about setting out we're committed in the first instance. We form an action planning group, and that action plan develops tasks and actions that would take us against those standards that are within the domains that were outlined at 3.2. And the intention would be to bring report and progress back to the Community Planning Partnership Board. So in terms of the recommendations, turning back to that, recommending that we have a formal written commitment to making South Lanarkshire an age-friendly community, a great place to go older, that we work with interested partners in developing an age-friendly action plan, and that the voice of older people is represented in the Community Planning Partnership via Seniors Together. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Kay. And before I throw this out to questions, I just want to put on record my own appreciation for the work that has been done in this report, and also the push behind it that comes from Seniors Together, our older people's champion. And I know that this is also, I was talking to Councillor Chalmers earlier this week, and I know that this is some of the groundwork for this has been laid in the Community Planning Partnership previously. So I just want to put on record my appreciation for all those who have brought this item to the Council. And I think it is a very positive step forward. On that basis, there are a few questions here. So could I come to Councillor Logan in the first instance?
Here's the ageism bit. Can't work the machine. I really thank you very much for your kind words, Joseph. But I have to say that in September or thereabouts, we had a very positive meeting with yourself and the chair of Seniors Together and the vice chair. And the lead officer, and from there things have moved on a push. I understand that during COVID times things sort of stalled and didn't move just as quickly as they possibly could, but since then things have really went on apace, so much so we're sitting here today with this report. I think ageism or any ism that we seem to talk about nowadays, there's an ism for everything. But in particular, the world would stop without older members of the community. They do babysitting services, they allow younger people to go out and work. They are involved heavily now with their families and various different things. The wealth of talent that I have met since even just taking up, meetings and positions is outstanding. You've got engineers, you've got ex-teachers or retired teachers, you've got people who did all sorts of things out in the community, and really we should garner and harness their talents and put it all to better use. I don't like the word ism, because sometimes they'll tell you you're too young, or you're not old enough, or you're too old, or whatever, and we should just take people as we find them and take them at whatever level they can put into society. But thank you for your kind words, Chair, but thank you again to you for the interest that you took, and to Kay and everybody else who worked to get it to where it is today. And hopefully we will go on and take great strides. And I have to tell you, my granddaughter, who would say she's woke, whatever that is, but anyway, she's woke. I'm no wakened up yet, but she told me, well, you see, they gave you that job, Gran, because, well, she just looked at me. So I'm one of the ones that's coming along to try and make this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Could I come now to Councillor Chalmers?
Thanks, Chair. Just as you referenced, I just wanted to thank Seniors Together and SOPA for the work they did with the lived experience budget that was provided by the Community Planning Partnership, and they therefore came to Community Planning Partnership and put this proposition to the CPP back then. So it's to their credit, the work that's gone on, and obviously there's been a wee bit of a pause, but they've been working hard in the background. So all credit to the Chair and her team, and the officers within Seniors Together, and also to the previous Older People's Champion, Councillor McGuigan, who led some of that work back then. So really delighted to see it coming to this point today. I think from a point of just request, it'd be good, I think, for all of us as members to be really fully aware about what this entails, so that we get maybe some kind of briefing, so we're able to fully support it, and also at a very local level encourage our older people, including myself, because I'm in that category too, to get involved and participate in the work that they do to make sure it's as meaningful as possible. Thanks.
Never. I think we can take on board that request, which is the point I'm taking from that contribution, and maybe get some information distributed to members. Can I come now to Councillor Margaret Walker?
Thank you, Chair, and I would just like to welcome the report and thank people for all the work that's been done. And it's also just to make a suggestion, you may well have thought about it. There's a lot of discussion just now around libraries and opening hours. I happen to have a look at some of the North Lanarkshire libraries, and some of the activities and programmes that are going on in relation to older people are absolutely excellent. They've got a programme packed full of activities. So could I make a suggestion in terms of the action plan that the people that are appointed to take this forward actually look at that as an area of exploration and how they can expand activities, and look at the libraries at the moment, because I know there is some discussion around kind of opening hours and the use of the libraries. And certainly when you look at the website in terms of North Lanarkshire, there's loads of information about the libraries and the activities. And to me, this just looks like an absolutely excellent area to actually, work with the libraries on, particularly when we're coming to, discussing with leisure and culture, the future of the libraries. I think this is something that should be looked at closely and developed through this. Thank you.
I think there's a suggestion made there that we can take on. I'll maybe take some of these points and come back to Kay, because I think some suggestions as opposed to direct questions. What I would say, there are, through South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, who are also now part of the Community Planning Partnership, there's some good work that takes place with seniors together in libraries just now, and maybe we just need to be better at publicising some of what that is. Could I come now to Councillor Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Can I echo the thanks to that other people have made for the work that's been done on this? I'd like to make one point, if I may, which is the local aspect of all of this. We're talking about the Community Planning Partnership, which obviously has its various partners in it. But I do think there's a relevant part for the area committees here, because it is a local thing in very many respects. Paragraph 4, for example, talks about livable neighbourhoods, limiting traffic, spaces for neighbours, all that. All that's local stuff. That's got to be determined, I think, at a locality sort of level if it's going to be effective. Just to give a small example, because I think this runs right through the work the council does. I had cause yesterday to make observation to the police about a guy who'd parked right on the pavement in Burns, at a key point in Burnside, who had therefore blocked the access, not just for prams and people, but for older people who had to go out into the road at some risk to their lives. Getting about the place safely is actually quite an intrinsic part, if I may say so, of livable neighbourhoods for older people. And I think, therefore, just an example of the way in which it goes right across the agenda of the council. The action plan gives you the strategic bit, that's absolutely right. The locality bit, though, I think is quite important. And I just wonder whether there's relevance in it going for discussion and action at the proper times to the area committees as well. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks for that. I'm going to take that one as a suggestion again, and I don't know if I know Kay's been jotting some of these points down. I'm going to take one more question and come back, because I think there's a suggestion there. I know in my own area committee, we had a discussion yesterday about the agenda of it. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take one more point, which is from Councillor Kirsten Robb, and then I'll ask Kay to wind this up. Okay. Kirsten.
Thanks very much for this interesting initiative. Totally support the proposal and note the work done by Seniors Together over many years to highlight the issues of older people and champion them as well. Just noting that a lot of the things that will improve things for older people will improve things for everyone in the community as well, and younger people especially too. For example, the parks, the 15-minute neighbourhoods, the better streets, the better paths that Robert talked about, libraries, speed reduction, safer streets, more livable communities, better public transport, local facilities, all those things will benefit younger people. So looking through an equalities lens at the issues we've got and taking that across the council, I think is really important. to benefit older people and younger people as well. So I noticed, just had a quick Google there's a youth-friendly community award, and I think that might be something to look at in future as well, to make sure that young people's voices, particularly with the incorporation of the United Nations Rights in the Child, might be an interesting proposal. But for now, congratulations to the older people and to the officers working on this, and wish it every success, and we'll support it.
Thank you very much for that. And before I come to Kay, I suppose I've got my own point, which is I think I'm right in saying if we were to secure this status, we would become the first authority area in Scotland to do so. So there's a really positive story to tell on the back of the, I think, very constructive and positive contributions we've had today. But I'm going to come to Kay to take those points.
Thank you for that, Chair, and thanks everybody for the warm words. I'll certainly pass that on to Seniors Together, who do the bulk of the work in this area, and folk will be familiar with how much activity there is carried out by a very small group. So it's good to see the recognition for them there. I think in terms of, there were some really good suggestions in amongst those contributions. So in terms of the action plan will of course look at not just what we're doing, but also what else is happening elsewhere. You're quite correct. There's a lot happens within South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. If I think about some of the over 50s events, for example, they're very lively, but perhaps we've not publicised that quite in the same way that North Lanarkshire do. In terms of information coming back, of course we can provide more information to members on an ongoing basis. What I would suggest is, and I'll go back and talk to Seniors Together about this, is maybe once we've got the action plan a little more formalised, it can come back to individual area committees, for example, to give that level of area-based information and activity. And I would share your views round about parking on pavements is one of my pet peeves. For a whole host of reasons, it's just the wrong thing to be doing, isn't it? So lots there, and of course we'll take all that back in. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you everybody for those contributions. Can I ask that we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. Can I now come to item 7, which is on the Fair Work First statement, and I'm returning to Kay to pick that item up. Kay.
Thank you, Chair. And this report really highlights the requirement to advance the Fair Work First criteria as part of the Scottish Government's grant conditions, and seek approval from the committee in order to incorporate a Fair Work First statement on our council website. So this is recent stuff. So on the 6th of December, the Scottish Government announced that organisations applying for public sector grants would require to meet a number of requirements over a phased period. And this then began appearing in the requirements for grant applications. So in terms of that, the council do also apply for grants. So although we very clearly would set out our stance in terms of Fair Work First, we don't have that public statement appearing on our website, and really that is the meat of this particular report. So, as I said, we meet the criteria, and we've got a draft statement there at Appendix 1 on this report. It's been round our trade union colleagues. I've had warm words back from those that have contributed to that. But we have a role ourselves also in terms of Fair Work First, in terms of procurement and grant awards that we give. And as such, the statement at Appendix 1 also references using those criteria in these processes where appropriate in relation to Fair Work First. So I'm happy to take any questions in relation to the report, but I'm asking for the report to be noted and the statement to be approved for publication on the website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions arising from that report? Kirsten Robb.
Thank you, and thanks, Kay, for your answers and your report. Already been asking a few questions, so this looks great. It's just to understand a bit more as it comes down the line how the council, as a grant awarding body, will introduce these aspects, so that there is a requirement to pay the living wage in the grants that we give out as well, where that's possible. I know procurement can be a wee minefield, but if we can provide more information that once officers have had a chance to look at it, that would be really helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Robb. So you're correct in terms of procurement that there is quite a kind of legal background to what you can and can't do within procurement. As a council, we're meeting our current requirements, we're meeting our current criteria. We are expecting some more guidance out. And when that comes out, then Craig Ferguson, who is the expert in procurement, will no doubt come back and talk in a bit more detail round about that. Geraldine McCann, in terms of the grant awarding, had a look at what was in the statement, quite content with what's in there at this point in time. But again, we'll be looking at her conditions that are attached to council grants. And again, if there are changes in that, coming back to committee. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Are there any other questions on that item? I'm not seeing any. If that's the case, can I ask that we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Come now to item 8, which is on land and property, transfers and disposals, and can I invite Stephen Gibson to speak to that item?
Thanks, Chair. This is a short report. It's contained in pages 55 to 57 in your pack, and it's seeking approval for 2 transactions of land that are held in the HRA. Areas of land are described in section 3 in appendices A and B that are attached. The first transaction is a proposal by a local landowner and supermarket owner who is seeking approval to extend an existing retail unit in Netherburn. As part of that proposed planning application, they're seeking to acquire a piece of land from the HRA, and the purpose of that land is to build 18 car parking spaces. The second piece of land is a small piece of land in East Kilbride, and it's to form a footpath. Section 5 tells you the financial implications. Both pieces of land are held by the HRA, therefore any capital receipts would go to the HRA. And in both cases, the transactions have a value of less than £100,000. So the recommendation is for committee to consider and, if approved, declare surplus for both pieces of land so that Colleagues and Property can start to conclude negotiations with both owners. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. Can I ask if there are any questions on that item? Not seeing any questions. Can I ask that we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Can I come now to item 9, which is on external representation to the Education Resources Committee, and can I invite Tony McDade to speak to that report? Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is just to provide an update on the arrangements for the appointment of representatives other than councillors to serve on the Education Resources Committee. You'll see that the background of this started on the 29th of June 2022, and it's the election process for religious parent, carer and teacher representatives for the Education Committee. In terms of the update in section 4, you'll see that we are proposing today, if the paper is approved, for 2 teacher representatives, and then there's also an update in section 5 on the fact that we're now going through a nominations process for 1 parent member, and we had 4 applicants for it, which we're pleased to say, with 2 available places, and we're going through an interview process as well, and that's also the same procedure an update for our 3rd religious representative, and again we have a couple of nominations and we're now going through that process as well. So, Chair, it's just to bring the committee back to section 2.1, and that's obviously to note to confirm the 2 teacher representatives and to note the process is still ongoing for the Parent Council and religious representation for the Education Committee.
Thank you very much, Tony. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? Not seeing any questions, so can I ask that we agree the report? Okay, thank you. I come now to item 10, which is recommendations referred by the Housing and Technical Resources Committee, and can I ask Stephen Gibson again to speak to that report?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. This is the report that was approved by the Housing and Technical Committee on the 23rd of January. The report sought approval the report gave an overview of the financial assumptions that underlie the HRA business plan for 2023-24. It recommended a 3.5% rent increase and also recommended approval or endorsement, I should say, of a capital programme of £63.916 million. The report was approved by committee, the report was approved by committee. It was noted that it was endorsed subject to approval today and by full council at a later meeting. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Stephen, can I ask if there are any questions on this item? I have one question, which is from Alec Allison. Alec.
It's not a question, Chair. It was just the fact that at that committee meeting, during the meeting, those online, their screens all froze and therefore were excluded. Now, I'm led to believe it was fairly near the end of the meeting anyway, but the points are that they were not aware within the room that those offline had not been able to conclude that meeting, and it could have been more of an issue if there had been any discussion. So I think we do need to look as to how we are managing Conferro and when and how we are able to ensure that those who are online can take a full part in the meetings. Because I'm led to believe that most of the people trying to call in only got the engaged tone as well. So I presume somebody did get through and everyone else didn't. I'm not sure in this case it would have made a fundamental difference, but I think we do need to recognise that there is an issue there that we need to address as to how we are working with Conferro.
Yeah, I think there was there was a similar issue at the area committee yesterday, at the East Kilbride area committee yesterday. I think IT are very much aware of it and have identified, I think, what they think were a number of potential causes. When it comes to Andrea Cowan.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to welcome the news that the rent increases have been restricted to 3.5%, given some of the horror stories we're hearing through other councils about measures that they may have to take. And also very pleased that this is fully supported by the tenants who were involved in the consultation. So really just to make that point that while nobody wants to be increasing any rents or council tax or whatever we have to maybe look at in the coming weeks, the 3.5% I think is I think we can justify that, and as I say, delighted that the tenants have supported it. Thanks.
Thanks for that. And I think if I'm right, the COSLA cap on rent that was negotiated was £5 per week was the national cap that local authorities had agreed to make, and obviously the weekly cost of this rent increase is just over half of that, so it's substantially below that cap. Morizak.
Thank you. Firstly, I can say that I'm disappointed that we have to increase the rent, but it's totally understandable in the current climate, especially with the cost of living crisis and the forthcoming increase in council tax as well. But welcome the capital spend of £63 million, especially since we are at record levels of people being homeless, and that will help towards that. But we ask the Scottish Government for more funding for the capital spend so that we can build more council houses.
I've written a letter to our MSPs today regarding the Scottish budget. And I'm not sure if it's been issued yet, but I can assure you it includes requesting more money in both revenue and capital for South Lanarkshire Council. Davy McLachlan.
Thanks, Chair. In response to Councillor Allison's remarks, I need to apologise. It was a very, very quick meeting, and by the time we realised there was an issue, the meeting had finished. So apologies to anybody who wanted to ask a question, but I welcome the positive feedback and also Councillor Razak's comments. It's not nice to see increases, but to reiterate again, the tenant participation group are fully supportive and they're consulted along the way. It's not as if we're suggesting to them, we work with them. It's a joint programme, so that they're more than happy with, because they know the results that they get from it, the investment that goes into housing, so they fully welcome that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you for those contributions. Can I ask that we agree the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Can I come on to items for noting? We have one item, item 11, representation on outside organisations. It's a brief item, and can I ask Geraldine McCann to speak to that item?
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is brief. It's to ask committee to note that Councillor McLachlan has been appointed as the Council's representative on the West of Scotland Road Safety Forum, and you're getting it at this stage because routinely the person represented is the chair of the Internal Road Safety Forum, and Councillor McLachlan was appointed as chair in November, and also that Councillor Cowie is the sub for that because she was appointed as deputy chair at the same meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. There's no points on that item. If that's the case, item 12 is urgent business. There are no items of urgent business, so can I thank everybody for attending the meeting, and I'll bring it to a close. Thank you.